I used to think I had it all figured out. Love, loyalty, happiness. Those were things I believed in wholeheartedly. I thought that if I worked hard, treated my wife with respect, and stayed committed, we'd have the life we dreamed of together. Lisa was my everything. She was the one I wanted to grow old with, the one I trusted completely. There was no question in my mind that she felt the same. I believed in loyal women. I believed that real love could weather anything, that the vows we made actually meant something. I thought that as long as I did everything I could, as long as I was good enough, Lisa would stay by my side, and we'd build our future together, just like we always talked about. And yet, in the back of my mind, there was always this tiny fear. What if it wasn't enough? What if she looked elsewhere? But I brushed those fears aside because that wasn't Lisa. My Lisa wouldn't do that. I think part of me wanted to see the world in black and white. Good and bad, loyal and unfaithful. I believed that people who betrayed their partners deserved the consequences that came their way. But that's the thing about beliefs. They can make you blind. They make you see the world not as it is, but as you want it to be. I wanted to believe Lisa was different. I wanted to believe she would never hurt me like that. My biggest desire was simple. I wanted to be with a woman who loved me as much as I loved her. Someone who would be by my side no matter what, who would see my flaws and still think I was worth it. I thought Lisa was that person. I wanted to be enough for her, and for the most part, I thought I was. We had our dreams, happiness, a life filled with shared moments, and a love that would last until the end. That was what I lived for, but I wasn't blind to my shortcomings. I knew I didn't have as much money as I'd hoped to at this point in my life. I wasn't as successful as I wanted to be. There were days when I'd look at my reflection and see a man who was trying his best but always coming up short. Still, Lisa never complained, never made me feel like I wasn't enough. So I told myself those fears were just in my head. Yet there were always those moments of doubt, those whispers in the back of my mind. I'd see other relationships fall apart, friends, neighbors, people we knew, and I'd wonder, could that happen to us? But I'd always answer myself with a resounding no. My Lisa would never do that. I believed that so deeply that I never thought I'd have to question it. It was a comforting belief, one that kept me from seeing the cracks that were beginning to form beneath the surface. But now looking back, I see that I ignored the signs. I ignored the moments when Lisa seemed distant, the times she'd come home late and brush off my questions. I wanted to believe in her so badly that I convinced myself everything was fine. I wanted to hold on to that dream of happiness, to the belief that Lisa was loyal, that our love was unbreakable. It was easier to live in that bubble than to face the truth. I remember that day vividly. It was a regular weekday afternoon, and I was at home, just getting ready to settle in, when there was a knock at the door. It was Tom, my neighbor. I could tell right away that something was off. He wasn't his usual cheerful self. He looked almost uncomfortable, like he was struggling to decide whether or not he should say what was on his mind. After a few awkward moments, he started talking, and as his words came out, I could feel my stomach drop. He told me he had seen Lisa, not just once, but a few times, out and about with someone else, someone who wasn't me. He described seeing her with another man, holding hands, looking way too close for just friends. He spoke carefully, almost reluctantly, and I could see the pity in his eyes, that look that says, "I wish I didn't have to be the one to tell you this." I stood there, frozen. My first reaction was denial. I wanted to tell him, that he must be mistaken, that it wasn't Lisa, that there was some kind of misunderstanding. My Lisa wouldn't do that. But as I stood there, trying to find the words, all I could manage was a nod. My voice caught in my throat, and I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to fall into something I wasn't prepared for. Tom apologized. He said he wasn't sure if he should have told me, but he felt I deserved to know. He looked genuinely sorry, but his words kept echoing in my head. Lisa, with another man, holding hands, close. My mind started replaying every little moment over the past few months that hadn't made sense. Her late nights, the sudden change in her mood, the way she seemed to drift away from me. It was like all those pieces were starting to come together, and the picture they were forming was one I didn't want to see. I thanked Tom, though I could barely hear my own voice. He nodded, patted my shoulder, and left, leaving me standing there in the doorway, stunned. The silence of the house felt different now, heavy, suffocating. I wanted to believe that Tom was wrong, that there was some other explanation. But deep down, there was something telling me that he wasn't, that everything I had feared, everything I had refused to even consider, was real. I sat down, my head in my hands, trying to think. I wanted to find a reason, something that would explain it all away, but nothing came. All I could feel was this cold emptiness, this growing crack in the belief that Lisa was loyal, that we were unbreakable. The belief I had held on to for so long, that Lisa was different, that our love was untouchable, was starting to fall apart, and I didn't know how to stop it. I wanted to talk to Lisa right then and there, to demand answers, to have her tell me it wasn't true. But at the same time, I was terrified. I wasn't ready to hear her confirm it, to hear her say that she had chosen someone else. I wasn't ready for my worst fear to become reality. So I sat there, frozen in that moment, feeling the first real crack in everything I had believed in. And for the first time, I felt truly lost. After Tom left, I found myself spiraling. There was this war going on inside my head, a constant back and forth between wanting to believe in Lisa and the nagging doubt that Tom was right. I kept telling myself that it couldn't be true, that Lisa loved me and she would never do something like that. But then, there were those little things that started to stand out, the things I had brushed off before. The late nights at work, the sudden urgency to go out with friends, the way she would smile at her phone, a smile that didn't quite reach me. I wanted to trust her. I wanted to be the kind of husband who didn't doubt his wife, who believed in the love they had. I tried to convince myself that there had to be an explanation, that Tom must have misunderstood, that maybe it was just an old friend she hadn't told me about. I wanted to find anything that would make this all go away. But the more I tried to convince myself, the harder it became. I started to notice every small detail. I'd watch her closely, how she acted when she got a text, how her voice changed when she answered her phone. I hated myself for it, for becoming this suspicious version of myself that I never wanted to be. It was like I was trying to find evidence to either confirm or deny what Tom had said, and every small thing I noticed seemed to only make my fears worse. I'd see her smile fade when I asked about her day, or how she'd get defensive when I questioned where she had been. It all added up, and each piece of evidence felt like another blow. But still, I couldn't fully accept it. I didn't want to accept it. The idea of Lisa being with someone else felt impossible, like a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. I'd find myself staring at our wedding photo, the one we kept on the mantel, And I'd remember the way she looked at me that day, the way she promised to love me forever. I'd think about the life we built together, the plans we made, the dreams we shared. It was all too real, too precious, to believe it could end like this. I wanted to hold on to that belief, to keep living in the comfort of the life I thought we had. But the doubts were relentless. They'd hit me at random times, when she'd be late coming home, when she'd suddenly need to step outside to take a call. I'd hear Tom's words echoing in my mind, and I'd feel that pit in my stomach grow deeper. I tried to push it down, to ignore it, but it was like trying to hold back a storm. The more I fought it, the stronger it became. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. Lisa had gone out with friends. At least that's what she said, and I was left alone in the house, staring at the clock as the hours ticked by. The doubt, the suspicion, the fear, it all became too much. I found myself pacing the living room, my thoughts racing. Was she really with her friends? Was she with him? Was I just fooling myself by trying to hold on? I wanted to call her, to demand answers, but I knew I couldn't. I was too scared of what I might hear. I was too scared that everything I had believed in would come crashing down, that the love I thought we had was already gone. So, I waited, feeling the weight of every minute, feeling the cracks in my belief grow deeper with every second that passed. I was caught between wanting to know the truth and wanting to stay in the comfort of my ignorance. In the end, I chose to wait, to let it play out, to hope that maybe I was wrong. Maybe, just maybe, Lisa would walk through that door and everything would be okay. But deep down, I knew that something had changed. The trust, the belief that had once been unshakable, was now hanging by a thread. And all I could do was hope that somehow that thread wouldn't snap. As the days went by, the doubts kept eating away at me. But what hurt even more than the doubts about Lisa was the way it made me doubt myself. If what Tom said was true, if Lisa was really with someone else, then what did that say about me? I couldn't help but think that somehow this was my fault, that maybe I just wasn't enough for her anymore. I'd look at myself in the mirror and see a man who had tried his best, but ultimately failed. I wasn't as successful as I thought I'd be by now. I didn't have the kind of money that would let us live the life we always dreamed of. I wasn't the guy who could buy her expensive vacations or give her the kind of lifestyle she probably deserved. And maybe that was why she had gone looking elsewhere. Maybe I was lacking in ways that I couldn't fix. Every time I thought about Lisa with someone else, I imagined him being everything I wasn't. In my mind, he was successful, charming, confident, the kind of man that women couldn't help but be drawn to. And then there was me, just trying to make ends meet, trying to be the kind of husband I thought she wanted. The comparison was brutal, and no matter how much I tried to convince myself that I was enough, the doubts just kept coming back. I started to feel like a failure, not just in my marriage, but as a man. I thought about all the times I had struggled in my career, all the times I felt like I wasn't measuring up, and it all seemed to come back to this moment. If I had been more successful, if I had made more money, if I had been better, maybe Lisa wouldn't have looked elsewhere. Maybe she would still be here, loving me the way I had always loved her. I remember one night, I was sitting alone in our living room, staring at the empty space where Lisa usually sat, and it hit me. I felt this wave of worthlessness wash over me. Like everything I had worked for, everything I had believed in, wasn't enough. I had always thought that if I loved her enough, if I gave her my best, that it would be enough to keep us together. But now, all I could see were my failures, my inability to make her happy. my inability to be the kind of man she needed. I started questioning everything about myself. Was I too boring? Was I too predictable? Did I not make her feel special enough? I replayed every moment we had together, trying to find the point where I went wrong. I thought about the times I had been too tired to go out, the times I had chosen work over spending time with her, the times I had taken her for granted without even realizing it. It all felt like it was my fault, like I had driven her away without even knowing it. The worst part was that deep down, I still loved her. Despite everything, despite the doubts and the fear and the suspicion, I still loved Lisa. And that made it even harder because loving someone who might not love you back, who might have already chosen someone else, felt like the most painful kind of failure. I felt small, broken, and lost. I felt like no matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, I would never be enough. I wanted to be angry at Lisa. I wanted to blame her for everything, to see her as the one who had broken us, but I couldn't. All I could see was my own reflection. All I could feel was this overwhelming sense of inadequacy. If she had chosen someone else, then maybe that meant I wasn't worth choosing. Maybe I had never been worth choosing. It was like every insecurity I had ever felt, every fear I had ever buried, was suddenly out in the open, staring me in the face, and I didn't know how to fight it. All I knew was that the man I saw in the mirror wasn't the man I wanted to be. He was broken. He was doubting everything he stood for, and he didn't know if he could ever be whole again. Eventually, I couldn't keep living in the space between denial and doubt. I needed answers, even if they tore me apart. The tension in the house had become unbearable, and every time I looked at Lisa, I found myself questioning everything. Her smile, her words, even the way she looked at me. I needed to know, once and for all, whether everything I believed in had been a lie. One evening after dinner, I decided it was time. I couldn't keep pretending. My heart was pounding, my hands were shaking, but I knew I had to do it. I asked Lisa if we could talk. She looked up from her phone, her expression shifting as she noticed the seriousness in my voice. She put the phone down and sat across from me, and I could feel my throat tighten. It took everything in me to hold her gaze, to find the words that I had been dreading to say. "I need to ask you something, Lisa," I began, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine, and I could see the uncertainty there. I told her what Tom had said, about seeing her with someone else. I asked her if it was true. My voice cracked, and I could feel my chest tighten, the fear rising inside me. I wanted her to deny it, to tell me Tom was wrong, that it was all a misunderstanding. But the look in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. She hesitated. It was only for a second, but it felt like an eternity. And in that hesitation, I felt something inside me break. She looked down, and I could see the guilt on her face. She didn't deny it. Instead, she started to explain how she hadn't meant for it to happen, how she had felt disconnected, how she hadn't known how to talk to me about what she was feeling. Her words blurred together, and all I could hear was the confirmation that everything I feared was true. She had betrayed me. I wanted to shout, to scream, to demand to know why. Why wasn't I enough? Why had she chosen someone else? But all I could do was sit there, staring at her, feeling the weight of it all crash down on me. My hands were trembling, my heart felt like it was breaking in my chest, and I couldn't find the words to express the pain that was consuming me. I heard her say she was sorry, that it was a mistake, that she still loved me, but her words felt hollow, like they couldn't reach me. through the wall that had suddenly gone up between us. I asked her if she loved him. She looked away, her silence answering the question for her. It was like a punch to the gut, knocking the air out of me. Everything I had believed in, everything I thought we had, felt like it was crumbling. I had trusted her, loved her, built my life around her, and now it was all falling apart. The future I had imagined for us, the dreams we had shared, they were gone, shattered in an instant. She reached across the table, her hand trying to find mine, tears streaming down her face. But I pulled away. I couldn't let her touch me. Not now, not after everything. I stood up, feeling like I was losing my footing, like the ground beneath me had given way. I looked at her one last time, and all I could ask was, why? But she didn't have an answer, and I realized that maybe she never would. Maybe there wasn't an answer that would ever make sense to me. I turned and walked away, leaving her there at the table, her apologies echoing behind me. I walked through the house we had shared, the home we had built together, and for the first time, it felt like a stranger's place. The pictures on the wall, the memories we had made, they all felt like they belonged to someone else, to another life that no longer existed. My belief in us, in her, in everything we had, was shattered, and I didn't know if I would ever be able to put it back together. I closed the door behind me, and in that moment, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. After that night, everything felt like it was spinning out of control. The emotions came in waves, crashing over me, leaving me gasping for air. One moment, I'd feel numb, like I couldn't even process what had happened, and the next, I'd be overwhelmed by anger, sadness, and everything in between. It was like I was on a roller coaster that never stopped, a constant up and down, with no end in sight. I tried to go about my life as normally as possible, but it was impossible. I'd be at work, trying to focus on my job, and suddenly the image of Lisa with someone else would flash in my mind, and I'd lose all concentration. I'd feel the sting of betrayal all over again, and I'd have to take a deep breath just to keep myself from breaking down. It felt like no matter where I went, no matter what I did, the pain was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. The nights were the worst. I'd come home to an empty house, the silence deafening. The place that used to feel like home now felt cold and foreign. The bed we used to share felt too big, too empty. I'd lie there, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything over and over again in my mind. I'd think about the moment I found out, the confrontation, the way she looked at me when she couldn't deny it. I'd think about every moment we had shared together, wondering if it had all been a lie. Was any of it real? Did she ever really love me? There were nights when I'd get up, unable to sleep, and I'd pace the house, feeling like I was losing my mind. I wanted to understand why she did it, why I wasn't enough, why everything had fallen apart. But no matter how much I thought about it, no matter how many times I replayed it, there were no answers. Just more questions, more doubts, more pain. I tried to hold on to the anger. It was easier to be angry than to feel the sadness, the emptiness. I wanted to blame Lisa for everything, to hate her for what she had done to me. And there were moments when I did. Moments when I wanted her to feel the same pain she had caused me, to understand just how much she had hurt me. But then, just as quickly, the anger would fade, and all that was left was the sadness, the overwhelming, crushing sadness that made it hard to breathe. I missed her, and that was the hardest part. Despite everything, despite the betrayal, I missed Lisa. I missed the way she used to laugh, the way she would smile at me, the way she made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. I hated myself for missing her, for still loving her, even after everything she had done. It felt like a betrayal to myself, to still want her, to still long for what we used to have. But I couldn't help it. The love I had for her didn't just disappear overnight, no matter how much I wanted it to. There were moments when I thought about reaching out to her, about trying to fix things. I'd think about calling her, about asking her to come back, about trying to make things work. But then I'd remember the look in her eyes when she hesitated to answer if she loved him, and it would all come crashing down again. The realization that she had chosen someone else, that she had broken the trust we had, was like a knife twisting in my chest, and I knew that no matter how much I missed her, no matter how much I wanted things to go back to the way they were, it was impossible. We could never go back. I was lost in the pain, in the heartbreak, in the turmoil of it all. It felt like I was drowning, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find my way to the surface. The roller coaster of emotions, anger, sadness, longing, emptiness, never seemed to end. Each day was a new struggle, a new battle to get through. Some days, I thought I might be okay, that maybe I could get through this, and then out of nowhere, the pain would hit me all over again, and I'd be right back where I started. I didn't know if I'd ever be able to move on, if I'd ever be able to feel whole again. All I knew was that I had to keep going, even if it felt impossible. I had to keep moving, even if I didn't know where I was going. The only thing I could do was take it one day at a time, hoping that eventually the roller coaster would slow down, that the pain would become more bearable, and that maybe, just maybe, I'd find a way to heal. After the confrontation, I knew I was standing at a crossroads. I had a decision to make, whether to stay and try to fix what was broken, or to walk away and leave everything behind. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever faced, and it weighed on me every single day. Part of me wanted to stay, to believe that we could somehow get past this, that the love we had could still be saved. I loved Lisa, despite everything, and the thought of letting her go felt unbearable. But then, there was the other part of me, the part that knew I couldn't stay, the part that knew that no matter how much I loved her, the trust was gone. How could I stay with someone who had betrayed me like that, who had chosen someone else, while I was still believing in us? I knew that even if we tried to make it work, it would never be the same. The doubt would always be there, the fear that she would do it again, the feeling that I wasn't enough. I'd always be looking over my shoulder, always wondering if she was being honest with me, and that wasn't the kind of life I wanted to live. The fear of being alone was real. I had built my life around Lisa. Everything I did, everything I planned for the future, was with her in mind. The idea of starting over, of letting go of all the dreams we had built together, was terrifying. But I also knew that staying would mean sacrificing my own self-worth. It would mean accepting less than what I deserved, and I couldn't do that, not anymore. I remember sitting alone in the living room, staring at our wedding photo, and realizing that the love we had was gone. It wasn't something I could fix, no matter how much I wanted to. I couldn't go back to the way things were, and I couldn't pretend that everything was okay. I had to choose myself, even if it meant walking away from the person I thought I'd spend my life with. And so, I made the decision. I decided to leave. It wasn't easy. It felt like tearing a part of myself away, like losing a piece of my heart. But deep down, I knew it was the only way I could ever truly heal. I had to let go of the past, of the dreams I'd held onto for so long, and find a way to build something new for myself. It was the hardest decision I've ever made, but it was also the first step toward finding myself again. After I made the decision to leave, the emptiness hit me like a wave. The house that Lisa and I had shared, the place that had once been filled with laughter, warmth, and love, now felt like a hollow shell. It was just me now, and the silence was deafening. Every corner of the house held a memory. Our pictures on the walls, her favorite mug still in the kitchen, the blankets we used to cuddle under on the couch. It was all a reminder of what was gone, of what I had lost. The nights were the hardest. I'd sit in the living room, the TV on, just for some background noise, trying to drown out the silence that surrounded me. I'd catch myself glancing at the door, almost expecting her to walk in, to tell me she was home. But she never did, and I'd be left with the empty realization that she wasn't coming back. I had chosen this, and now I had to live with it. I tried to fill the void, to keep myself busy, but the loneliness seemed to be everywhere. I'd walk into the kitchen and remember the mornings we spent making breakfast together. I'd lie in bed at night and remember how she used to curl up next to me, her warmth comforting me. Now, it was just empty space, and it felt like a cold reminder of everything I'd lost. I think the worst part was that I still missed her. Despite everything, despite the betrayal, I still missed Lisa. I missed her presence, her laugh, the way she'd smile at me. It was hard to reconcile those feelings with the reality of what she had done. I knew I had made the right decision, that I couldn't stay in a relationship where I wasn't valued, but that didn't make the loneliness any easier. The emptiness of the house mirrored the emptiness I felt inside. I knew I had to face it, that I had to learn how to live with it, but it was a struggle every day. I had to find a way to be okay with being alone, to find comfort in my own company. It was a slow process, and there were moments when it felt unbearable, but I knew it was something I had to do. I had to face the loneliness head-on if I ever wanted to heal, if I ever wanted to move forward. In those first few weeks after Lisa left, I realized that I couldn't do it alone. The silence, the loneliness, the emptiness. It was too much for me to carry on my own. Reaching out for support wasn't easy. I had always prided myself on being strong, on being able to handle whatever life threw at me. But this was different. I was broken, and I needed someone to help me pick up the pieces. I called Mark, my best friend. We hadn't talked about anything serious in a while. It had always been the usual small talk, the casual catch-ups. But when he picked up the phone, I could barely get the words out before I broke down. I told him everything about Lisa, about the affair, about how I was feeling completely lost. And Mark, without hesitation, said he'd be right over. He didn't try to fix anything or tell me what I should do. He just listened, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I wasn't alone. My sister Sarah was another lifeline. When I told her what had happened, she was angry. Angry at Lisa for hurting me, for betraying the love we had shared. But more than anything, she was there for me. She told me to come over anytime, and I did. She made me dinner, let me sit on her couch and talk, or just be silent, whatever I needed. It was comforting, being around family, feeling the warmth that I had been missing for so long. It wasn't easy, opening up like that. I had always been the one people could rely on, and now here I was, leaning on them, feeling like I was failing somehow. But what I came to realize was that it didn't make me weak. It didn't mean I was less of a man. It just meant I was human. And as much as I wanted to be strong on my own, I needed to let others in. I needed to let them help me carry the weight that was too heavy for me alone. The support from Mark, Sarah, and a few others helped me see that I still had people who cared about me, who wanted me to be okay. I wasn't as alone as I felt, and little by little, that support gave me the strength I needed to start picking myself up. It was the small things: Mark bringing over a six-pack and sitting with me, Sarah texting me every morning just to check in. Those small gestures made all the difference. They reminded me that I still had love in my life, even if it wasn't the love I had lost. There were still moments when the pain would hit me, when the loneliness felt unbearable. But knowing I had people I could call, people who were there for me, made it just a little bit easier to bear. It reminded me that I wasn't facing this alone, that even in my darkest moments, I had people who were ready to help me find my way through. After the initial shock started to fade, I found myself wrestling with a different kind of struggle, trying to understand why Lisa did what she did. I went back and forth between wanting to see her as the villain and trying to find some empathy for her choices. It was exhausting, this push and pull between anger and understanding, between wanting her to face consequences and wanting to let go. Part of me wanted her to pay for what she had done. She had betrayed my trust, broken everything we had built together, and I wanted her to understand just how much she had hurt me. I wanted her to feel the pain, to know what it was like to be left behind. It was a desire for justice, for some kind of balance to be restored. I wanted her to face the consequences of her actions, to feel the weight of what she had done to us. But then there was another part of me, a part that still remembered the good times, the love we once shared. I knew that people make mistakes, that sometimes we do things out of fear, insecurity, or loneliness. I tried to put myself in her shoes, to understand why she might have made the choices she did. Was it something I did or didn't do? Was she unhappy in ways I hadn't noticed? Did I fail to be there for her in the way she needed me to be? It didn't excuse what she did, nothing could, but it made it harder to simply paint her as the villain. She was human, just like me, and maybe she had her own struggles that I hadn't seen. Maybe she had felt lost, disconnected, and made choices she regretted. I found myself torn between wanting to see her punished and wanting to forgive her, not for her sake, but for my own peace. Trying to balance these two sides, empathy and justice, was exhausting. Some days, I'd feel the anger rise up, and I'd want nothing more than for her to feel the consequences of her betrayal. And then, on other days, I'd find myself remembering the person she was before all of this, the person who once made me feel like the luckiest man in the world. It was confusing, and it left me feeling like I was constantly at war with myself. But as time went on, I realized that maybe I didn't need to have all the answers. Maybe I didn't need to decide whether she deserved my forgiveness or my anger. Maybe it was enough to accept that what happened, happened, and that I needed to move forward for my own sake. It wasn't about letting her off the hook, and it wasn't about holding on to the anger forever. It was about finding my own peace, about letting go of the burden of trying to understand every detail. I chose to focus on myself, on my own healing, rather than on what she deserved. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but slowly I started to let go of the need for justice and the need for empathy. I realized that I could acknowledge the hurt, understand that Lisa was human and flawed, and still choose to walk away. It was about finding balance, about choosing myself, and that was the most empowering decision I could make. After leaning on my friends and family for support, I knew I needed to start focusing on myself. I had spent so long feeling broken, feeling like I wasn't enough, that I needed to remind myself who I really was. I needed to find a way to heal, to rediscover my self-worth beyond what had happened with Lisa. I started small. I took long walks in the evenings just to clear my head and be outside. It was simple, but there was something about the fresh air and the rhythm of my steps that helped calm my mind. I'd walk through the park, watch the sunset, and for those moments, I felt a little more at peace. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I also picked up my guitar again. It had been collecting dust in the corner of the room, something I hadn't touched in years. I remember sitting down one night and just strumming the strings, letting the music fill the silence that had felt so heavy for so long. I wasn't playing for anyone else. It was just for me. And in those moments, I started to feel like I was reconnecting with a part of myself that I had lost along the way. I even started going to the gym again. At first, it felt like a chore, but soon I realized that the physical activity was helping me in more ways than one. It was a release, a way to channel all the anger, the sadness, and the frustration that had been building up inside me. Each day, I felt a little stronger, a little more like I was reclaiming control over my life. There were still moments when the pain would hit me, when I'd think about Lisa and feel that familiar ache in my chest. But those moments started to become less frequent. Slowly, I was beginning to see that my worth wasn't tied to her actions, that I was more than the man who had been left behind. I was still me, and I was capable of finding happiness on my own. I realized that the love I had been looking for had to start with me. I had to learn to love myself again, to see myself as worthy of happiness, of love, of a life that mattered. It wasn't an easy journey. There were setbacks, there were moments when I doubted myself, but each day I took another step forward. I found joy in the little things, playing my guitar, cooking a good meal for myself, watching a movie that made me laugh. I started to see that I didn't need Lisa to be happy. I didn't need anyone else to validate my worth. I was enough, just as I was. And that realization, as small as it might have seemed, was the beginning of my healing. It was the first time in a long time that I felt hopeful, that I felt like I could build something new for myself. A life where I was whole, where I was strong, where I was truly happy. Just when I thought I was making progress, the doubts started to creep back in. It was almost like a shadow, lurking quietly until the moment I let my guard down. And then suddenly it was there, reminding me of everything I had lost. I'd be doing fine for a few days, feeling like I was finally starting to move forward, starting to feel like myself again. And then, out of nowhere, something would trigger all those old feelings. Sometimes it was as simple as a song on the radio, one that Lisa and I used to love. Hearing it brought back memories I wasn't ready to face, and I'd feel the ache of everything that had happened all over again. Other times, it was seeing a couple holding hands, smiling at each other, and it would hit me that I no longer had that. I'd feel the sting of loneliness, the emptiness of being on my own, and it made me question whether I had made the right choice in leaving. The doubts weren't just about Lisa, though. They were about me. Whether I'd ever be able to trust again, whether I was capable of being loved, whether I was worthy of happiness. I'd think about the future, and it would feel uncertain, terrifying even. What if I never found someone who loved me? What if I was destined to be alone? Those questions haunted me, and no matter how much progress I made, they always seemed to find their way back to me. I remember one night, sitting in the living room, the weight of it all suddenly crashing down on me. I felt like I had taken 10 steps forward, only to be pulled right back to where I started. The loneliness, the self-doubt, the fear of never being enough, it all came rushing back. And for a moment, I felt completely lost again. It was frustrating, feeling like I was stuck in this cycle, unable to truly break free from the past. But then I reminded myself that healing isn't a straight line. It isn't about constantly moving forward without ever looking back. It's messy, and it's filled with setbacks and moments of doubt, and that was okay. It didn't mean I wasn't healing. It didn't mean I wasn't strong. It just meant I was human. I had to learn to accept those setbacks, to understand that they were part of the process. There were going to be days when the pain resurfaced, when the doubts felt overwhelming, but that didn't mean I hadn't made progress. It just meant I was still on the journey. And slowly, I began to realize that each time I faced those doubts, each time I worked through them, I was getting stronger. I was learning how to face them without letting them consume me. The setbacks were hard, but they were also a reminder that I was still trying, still fighting to move forward. And that, in itself, was a victory. I wasn't giving up. I wasn't letting the past define me. I was still here, still moving, even if it was one small step at a time. One day, something changed. It wasn't dramatic, not some grand moment of realization, just a quiet shift. I was sitting at a coffee shop alone, sipping my drink, watching people come and go. It struck me that I wasn't feeling that familiar ache anymore. The loneliness, the emptiness, it wasn't as heavy as it had been. In that moment, I realized I was okay being by myself. I was actually enjoying my own company. It wasn't that the pain was gone completely, but it wasn't consuming me like it used to. I started to feel a sense of strength, a sense of independence that I hadn't felt in a long time. I had always defined myself by my relationship with Lisa, by what we had together. But now, I was beginning to see myself as more than that, as someone who could be whole on his own. I started focusing on things that made me feel alive. I signed up for a class at the local community center. Photography, something I'd always been interested in, but never pursued. It felt good to have something that was just for me, something that brought me joy without any strings attached. I'd go out and take pictures of whatever caught my eye: sunsets, people walking their dogs, flowers in bloom. It helped me see the beauty in the world again, to appreciate the little things. I also put more effort into my career. I had spent so much time feeling like I wasn't enough, like I didn't have the success or status that made me worthy. But now, it wasn't about proving myself to anyone else. It was about taking pride in my work, about challenging myself to do better. I took on new projects, stepped out of my comfort zone, and each small success made me feel more confident, more capable. The more I invested in myself, the more I realized that I didn't need Lisa to be happy. I didn't need a relationship to feel fulfilled. I was enough on my own. I was stronger than I had given myself credit for, and I was finally starting to see that. I could choose what made me happy, I could build a life that was meaningful, and I didn't need anyone else to validate that. That realization was a turning point for me. It was the moment I stopped defining myself by what had happened, by the betrayal and the heartbreak. I was no longer the man who had been left behind. I was someone who had faced his worst fears and found a way to rise above them. I had found my strength, my independence, and I knew that no matter what happened next, I would be okay. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I felt like I had a future that wasn't tied to anyone else, but was completely my own. And that was enough. I was enough. It was on one of those ordinary days, during one of my evening walks that I met her. I had decided to stop at a small bookstore, one of those cozy places with wooden shelves and the comforting smell of old books. I was browsing through the shelves, not looking for anything in particular, when I heard a voice beside me. "Have you read that one?" she asked, pointing at a book in my hand. I looked over, and there she was, a warm smile, genuine curiosity in her eyes. Her name was Emily, and before I knew it, we were talking. It started with books, sharing our favorites, laughing about the ones we didn't like. But soon, it turned into more. We talked about our hobbies, about our lives, about the things that made us happy. There was something different about Emily. It wasn't forced, it wasn't rushed, it was easy. She didn't know my story, and I didn't know hers, but in that moment, it didn't matter. We were just two people enjoying a conversation, two people who had found a small connection in the middle of an ordinary day. We ended up sitting in the little cafe attached to the bookstore, talking for over an hour. It felt natural, like there was no pressure, no expectations. I didn't feel the need to impress her or hide my past. I was just myself, and that seemed to be enough. She had this openness about her, a kindness that made me want to open up too. For the first time since Lisa, I felt a spark, something I hadn't thought I would feel again. When it was time for her to leave, she hesitated, then smiled and asked if I'd like to meet up again sometime. I almost couldn't believe it. After everything I'd been through, I wasn't sure if I was ready to open my heart again. But something about Emily made me want to take that chance. I said yes, and she wrote her number on a small piece of paper before leaving. As I watched her walk away, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not just hope for love, but hope for new beginnings, for new connections. Meeting Emily wasn't about erasing the past or pretending the pain never happened. It was about allowing myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could find happiness again. It was a small step, but it felt like the start of something new. For the first time, I felt like I could let someone in. Even if, just a little. It was a reminder that there was still beauty in the world, still possibilities waiting to be discovered. And that thought, that maybe my story wasn't over yet, made all the difference. Starting to see Emily more often was both exciting and terrifying. After everything I had been through with Lisa, the idea of opening my heart again felt like stepping into unknown territory, dangerous but also full of possibility. Trust was something I had lost faith in, and rebuilding that faith wasn't going to be easy. I knew that, but I also knew that if I ever wanted to move forward, I had to be willing to take the risk. Emily made it easier than I expected. She was patient, never pushing, never demanding more than I could give. She seemed to understand, without me even having to say it, that I had been hurt deeply. There were moments when I'd catch myself holding back, afraid to let her see too much of me, afraid that if I got too close, it would all come crashing down again. But she always made me feel safe, like I could take my time, like I could trust her at my own pace. I remember one evening, we were sitting on a park bench, watching the sun set, and I decided to tell her about Lisa. It wasn't easy. My throat tightened, my heart pounded, and I could feel the fear rising inside me. But I took a deep breath and started talking. I told her about the betrayal, about how it had shattered me, about the doubts and the pain that I was still working through. I expected her to pull away, to look at me differently, but she didn't. She just listened. Her eyes filled with understanding, and when I was done, she took my hand in hers and said, "I'm here. you don't have to rush. That was a turning point for me. It was the first time I felt like I could really trust someone again. Emily wasn't trying to fix me, and she wasn't trying to rush me into anything. She just wanted to be there, to share whatever I was ready to give. Slowly, I started to let my guard down, to trust her with more of my heart. It wasn't a dramatic leap. It was small moments, small steps that eventually started to add up. There were still times when the fear would creep in. When she'd get a call from an old friend and step away, I'd feel that familiar pang of doubt, that fear that maybe I'd get hurt again. But each time I reminded myself that she wasn't Lisa. She wasn't the one who had hurt me. She had shown me nothing but kindness and patience. And I had to trust that. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't without moments of hesitation, but I found myself wanting to believe in her. Emily helped me see that not everyone would hurt me, that I was still capable of love, of being loved. Rebuilding trust was a slow process, one that required me to confront my fears and let myself be vulnerable. But Emily made me realize that vulnerability wasn't a weakness. It was a strength. It was a choice I made, despite everything I had been through. And each time I chose to trust her, I felt a little stronger. I knew that there were no guarantees. There was no promise that I wouldn't get hurt again. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like it was worth the risk. I wanted to take that chance, with Emily, with myself, with the possibility of love again. And that, to me, was the most important step toward healing. It happened gradually, almost without me noticing. One day, I realized that I wasn't just feeling better. I was genuinely happy. It wasn't the kind of happiness that hits you all at once. It was more like a gentle warmth that had been building over time, a sense of peace that had begun to take root. I found myself smiling more, laughing more, feeling more alive than I had in a long time. And the reason for that was Emily. Emily wasn't just someone I cared about. She had become a partner, a friend, someone who made every day better just by being there. We shared moments that were simple, but full of meaning. It was the way she'd make me coffee in the morning, the way she'd listen to me talk about my day, the way she'd reach for my hand without even thinking. She made me feel seen, heard, loved, without expectations, without conditions. With Emily, I learned what it meant to truly love again. This time, it was different. It wasn't about holding on to an ideal or trying to live up to some unrealistic expectation. It was about being present, being vulnerable, and being honest with each other. It was about finding joy in the little things, in the everyday moments that made life beautiful. I didn't need grand gestures or promises of forever. I just needed her and the way she made me feel whole again. For the first time, I felt like I could let go of the past. The pain, the betrayal, the doubts. They were still there, but they no longer had power over me. They were just part of my story, part of what had brought me to this moment. And in this moment, I was happy. I had found someone who loved me for who I was, who accepted my flaws, my fears, and all the scars I carried. And I loved her just as much. I realized that losing Lisa wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of something new. It had forced me to find myself again, to rebuild, to become stronger. And because of that journey, I was able to love Emily in a way that was deeper, more honest, more real. I wasn't holding on to illusions anymore. I was holding on to her and the love we were building together. Closing the loop wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about accepting it, about understanding that everything I had been through had led me here, to this moment of peace and happiness. I knew that life would still have its challenges, that there would be ups and downs, but I also knew that I wasn't facing them alone. I had Emily by my side, and together we were building something beautiful. This was the love I had always dreamed of. Not perfect, not without flaws, but genuine and full of hope. And as I held Emily's hand, looking toward the future, I knew that I had finally found my way back to happiness. As I sit here now, reflecting on everything I've been through, I realize just how far I've come. The person I was when this journey began, broken, lost, drowning in heartbreak, feels like a distant memory. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but I found my way through the darkness. I found myself again. Looking back, I understand that the pain, as unbearable as it was, had a purpose. It forced me to confront my fears, my insecurities, and my own self-worth. It made me realize that I'm stronger than I ever knew. It taught me that my value doesn't come from someone else's love or validation, but from within myself. Losing Lisa felt like the end of everything I had believed in. But what I see now is that it was a beginning that led me to a deeper understanding of who I am, what I deserve, and what true love looks like. I had to let go of the person who hurt me, let go of the dreams that no longer served me, to make space for something new, something real. And then there was Emily. Meeting her was a gift I never expected, but one that came at the perfect time. She helped me see that love could still be beautiful, that it could be patient and kind. She taught me that I could open my heart again, that I could trust again. But most importantly, she showed me that I could be happy, truly happy, with someone who loves me for who I am. The journey wasn't about finding love in the end. It was about finding myself. It was about learning to be okay on my own, to find joy in my own company, to take pride in who I am. Love, when it came, was just an added blessing, one that I was ready for because I had already done the work to heal. Reflecting on everything, I feel grateful. Grateful for the pain, because it taught me strength. Grateful for the loneliness, because it taught me to value my own company. Grateful for the heartbreak, because it showed me what I truly deserve. And grateful for Emily, because she's a reminder that even after the darkest storms, there's light and there's hope. Life will always have its challenges, but I know now that I have the strength to face them. I know that I am capable of love, that I am worthy of happiness, and that I am enough. The past doesn't define me. It's just one part of my story. And as I look to the future, I feel hopeful, knowing that I'm exactly where I'm meant to be, with the person I'm meant to be with, living a life that is filled with love, purpose, and true happiness.